My name is Tim Anderson. I'm the executive chef and owner of Nanban. We're a Japanese soul food restaurant. We have one branch, the original branch in Brixton. We've got one now also in Seven Dials Market, which is very close to Covent Garden in central London. We originally started off doing Japanese food mainly from Kyushu, where I used to live. But when I got to London and started exploring all the different types of food that we have here, I decided to start incorporating what I call glocal flavors of London into the food. So in Brixton, that meant incorporating especially Afro-Caribbean flavors from Brixton Market, but also South Asian and Middle Eastern flavors from all over. And then here being in central London, we're using flavors from all over town, including influences from Billingsgate Market, Chinatown, wherever. London is an amazing city, and I think part of the ethos actually of Japanese cooking is sort of using what's available, and in particular ramen is very adaptable. So it made sense for us to start using London flavors in Japanese dishes. I'll talk a bit about umami and me and my understanding of umami and how I came to learn about it. I studied Japanese food first as a hobby when I was a teenager, and then at college I went to study Japanese food culture in Los Angeles. And so I learned pretty early on about umami and what it was. Of course, I first learned about it in a Japanese context and how it was discovered via dashi by Ikeda-san back in 1907 or something like that. But it's not then I quickly learned that it's not a Japanese flavor or a Japanese taste. It's a universal taste. It's just that dashi in particular, with that combination of kombu and katsuobushi, was what made Ikeda sort of investigate that flavor, because he knew it was sort of different from the four basic tastes that were understood at the time. So since then, I've just come to understand it like I would any other kind of basic taste, and something that's really essential to have in any kind of cooking, especially savory cooking, and something that has to be in balance with all the other tastes. So I often think of it as something that is both addictive and satisfying. As far as I understand it, it comes from different amino acids, which are often found in protein, which I think is why it triggers that sort of sense of satisfaction. But it can come from so many different sources. And of course, it's a good idea to sort of layer them and use them in conjunction with one another. I often cite Italian food, actually, as an example of how it's not exclusively Japanese, not exclusively Asian in any way, and every culture has their own ways of building umami and incorporating umami into dishes. So if you think about just a simple, say, pasta dish of anchovies, tomato sauce, and Parmesan cheese on top, that's going to be one of the most umami, delicious things you can eat, and it's nothing to do with Japan. But every culture has these ingredients. I mean, if you talk about British cooking, you've got things like bacon, you've got cheddar cheese, you've got Marmite, all these things that we all love universally that are umami. So I always think of umami as something that I need to incorporate one way or another, and if not, the dish is gonna feel like it's lacking something. So some dishes naturally have a lot of umami and you don't almost have to think about it. If you make something like udon in a classic dashi, that dashi is already gonna have, the dashi itself, plus soy sauce, plus maybe mirin. It's already naturally, just by the virtue of what it is, going to be very, very umami. If you make something else, let's say like a curry, you've got to think about then what's going to be the umami element in there. Because some curries, they start with onions, garlic, ginger, chilies, and then maybe the recipe will call for something like coconut milk or yogurt, and you're getting a little bit of umami, but you're not really creating that depth. So the way that you need to put that in is to think about things like how you're gonna season it, but more importantly, what sort of ingredients you can incorporate into that. Things like tomatoes, or really cooking your onions down so they develop that character. And other examples would be, say, incorporating both fish sauce and soy sauce into an Asian dish, or incorporating cheese and anchovies, all these things that have glutamate from one thing and inositol guanylate from the other. That'll make a really, really delicious food. And if you ever taste this, you think this needs something, don't always just go for the salt and pepper. Sometimes it needs umami. Sometimes it needs something like cheese or tomatoes or miso or soy sauce or scallops and bacon. Something umami.